life work has been an exploration of Western mind and why it is a trauma to itself.
Here in Arizona, Medora, I know you're aware, but we've been undergoing quite a level of assault that in many ways is unprecedented in current times, but in historical times, it's a repeat of the original genocide that took place beginning 500 years ago. And we see now this genocide and terroricide as being perpetuated with us as the victims, once again, as indigenous peoples. But in terms of this event that just took place, one of our acknowledgments has been to understand how the original victims of that systematic violation comes from the colonizing constituencies themselves. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yes, my work has led me to believe that my European ancestors were in fact colonized, and it is that colonization which is a violent process which they are now perpetuating, which is now being perpetuated onto other indigenous peoples, and that in essence everyone has been colonized. Everyone for whom Western mind is the dominant consciousness has been colonized.
You shared with us yesterday a story, some 4,500 years old, and it's tablet form, but it's probably older than that. Could you give us a little bit about that story you told yesterday?
The story I told yesterday is an ancient Babylonian creation story. It's known as the Enuma Elish, which comes from the first words of it. And at the beginning of it, there is no differentiation between the mother and the father and the world. They are all one thing. But as the story progresses, at some point, and this is the piece that I brought yesterday, the hero Marduk kills the mother Tiamat and makes the world out of her pieces. And the way I understand that myth or origin story is it is the origin story of Western mind, which says that the only way you can build civilization is to destroy Mother Earth and make civilization out of the pieces. My shorthand for that is killing the mother. And that I believe that you can see that what you see right now of victimization of indigenous peoples is that they are the mother is the land, and they are the people of the land. And so they have had to be subjugated, colonized, annihilated, because they are in the way of taking the mother, the pieces of dead mother, and making it into their world.
In this sense, Medora, you know, here in Arizona, we call it sometimes the wake-up call from the nightmare of manifest destiny. There's one Dixon line in the middle of the Sonoran Desert. Yet these are conceptions of membership in societies of the states of this civilization that you refer to, I think, in terms of the Western mind. First of all, clarify for us, why is it west? West of what?
Well, I'm using that as a shorthand, and it's really not very accurate.
I mean, it's to the east of here, from what I understand. If I know my directions, which I think I do.
Yes, that's true. What it really is the dominant consciousness. And it is not...
What is it you have a dominant consciousness? What is that?
It's a consciousness that's rooted in the need for domination.
Well, why would you have a need to dominate?
From my work, I would say that you have a need to dominate because you are in a state of what Jeanette Armstrong has called displacement panic. You have been separated. The people who live on the invaders of Turtle Island were uprooted themselves from their communities, from their lands, from the bones of their ancestors in those lands, from their culture, and came to, quote-unquote, a new world. All of the immigration stories for the invaders of Turtle Island start with, my ancestors came to this country when, ... as if they had no history before they came here. And I believe that that is a very, very deep soul grief, which has never, ever been dealt with, and when they came to this continent, they erased their consciousness not only of their own past, but they erased the consciousness of the fact that having left the land with the bones of their ancestors, they then came and invaded the land with the bones of someone else's ancestors, and they live without memory. And when you live without memory, without connection, without the land, without an understanding of your kinship with all the creatures on that land, if you live without that, it creates a very
insecurity.
Shattered.
Yeah, it's insecurity.
It
sense of
creates
insecurity.
A very shattered sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to cohere that sense of self, you have to identify with certain ideas, one of which is the white race is superior.
Well, just the fact that there is such a thing as a white race in the first place, right?
You invent a white race.
You invent a white. You got to first invent that there's such a thing as a white race, and then everybody else is off white.
Right. It's a splitting. It's a splitting of consciousness into quote unquote good and bad, good and evil, right and wrong.
And here,
and then you identify with what you say.
Savage and civilized.
Savage and civilized, right? And you identify with one part of that split, and you thrust the rest of the world into the other part of that split, and then your righteousness comes in about how it is your duty to colonize, subjugate, enslave, and Christianize these people.
Well, you just described Arizona. You know that, of course. I know you live further north on the plains territory, but you just described the situation in Arizona. In terms of policies coming out of the state government, being officialized, this displacement panic is getting an echo chamber of officialization by legislation and bills that are coming out of this process. But we all understand as indigenous peoples that this has nothing to do with law at all. This is all just a traumatized and fractured consciousness of insecurity that we heard you describe as displacement panic. And so what we did with this event over the last few days, we want to put in place a healing process to address this trauma that is perpetuating the colonization upon us, but also from within the European American constituencies themselves. So please, Medora, in your closing comment, make an address to our relatives, our brothers and sisters of the European American constituencies of the state of Arizona. What has to happen next?
What has to happen next is we all need to heal. We all need to heal from that sense of fractured consciousness. That fear which people feel about the changes that are happening around them is really a fear of losing their sense of identity. And I don't have an easy solution to how that healing occurs. But one thing I know is that when you stop seeing other people as ideas and start to know them as people, that it is the beginning of a healing that will and open your heart. That is the beginning of the healing process.
It would seem, Medora, that the heart longs for this.
The heart does long.
The human heart longs for this memory that's deeply rooted in what we are and who we are and where we are and when we are. And so in this longing, it's a form of being. And this belonging, I think, is the commandment that is pulling us together to accomplish what we have to do as indigenous peoples and just as human beings. And so for the constituencies of European Americans in the state of Arizona, there are some activities that are on the agenda to take place to deal with this. And if you could just share finally some words of encouragement.
My words of encouragement is that I know from my own healing how deep the need is for this understanding of a belonging that's much broader than the idea of belonging to a particular race, a particular religion, a particular way of
belonging
life.
To each other and to the earth.
That we belong to each other and the earth, and that it is the deepest soul need we have, and that the healing on the other side of this is immense. And I can only say that even if you don't know that you need this, at least think about the possibility that this is true.
Thank you, Medora.